That's it. It's time for a big shot.
Whether you call him Fast Eddie,
Don't you tell your boyfriend about this now.
the Silver Fox,
Up with skirts and down with paints.
the Silver Zipper,
Who built the Cajun Dome?
loved or loathed, Edwin Washington Edwards has made a name for himself.
Because I happen to be governor of a state.
With a Cajun lilt and coiffed hair now synonymous with Louisiana dealing.
I'll get back with you.
Now approaching 92 and living near a golf course in Gonzales,
You don't have the traffic problems.
the state's only ever four-term governor keeps the charm going.
I'm going to be active until I die.
And these days, Edwards deals in real estate.
There are three very important things in real estate: location, location, and location.
He renewed his broker's license in 2015, and since then has been pitching the hotspots.
People will call you and say, I need a place for a restaurant, I need a home, I need this or that. We'll begin to go out and search the available properties and make them available to them.
But it's not his first flirtation with the property business. When electrification first reached his rural Avoyelles Parish neighborhood, it was a teenage Edwards who turned on the lights.
I got books out of the school library and got a basic education in wiring, and I wired my father's house. People in the area were amazed and wanted me to wire their houses, but they wanted to wait a while to make sure my daddy's house didn't burn down.
With his wires, the son of a Catholic midwife and a Presbyterian sharecropper became a literal power broker for the farmlands, and along the way yearning for higher power.
When I was 14 years old, I told my girlfriend I was going to run for governor.
Edwards' biographer Leo Honeycutt.
His mother said that when he was about 7 years old, he got to acting up and playing a clown at a party or some gathering. And she said, and I had to get him to quiet down. I grabbed him by the ear and took him out on the front porch to give him a, talking to. And she said, when I finished, he looked up at me and said, "You're not going to do that one of these days when I'm governor." 7 years old.
And when he wasn't evoking Huey Long, Edwards stood in the front of Marksville's Nazarene Church, a youth preacher polishing his public reach.
Be ye not deceived, God is not mocked. For whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap.
Nazarene rules were strict. No sex before marriage. And for women, no hemlines above the knees. Edwards himself would only spend a few years at the church, but he says in Jesus' teachings, he found a lifelong roadmap.
I know what it is to see people without food. I grew up in that kind of an environment. I don't want it to happen to anybody.
If you sow hate and distrust, that's what you're going to reap. On the other hand, if you show love and attention and care, I think you'll end up reaping that.
A mantra that took him through the U.S. Navy and LSU Law School by age 21.
And I hitchhiked from Marksville to Baton Rouge to go to school.
And when he realized how few lawyers were sowing firms in Acadia Parish, he sought to reap the benefits, moving with his new bride Elaine and opening shop in the so-called rice capital of America.
I'd be a rich man today if I'd have stayed as a practicing lawyer, because I was a good lawyer.
But Edwards found his itch for elected office too strong not to scratch. He spent time on the Crowley City Council, the Louisiana State Senate, and the U.S. House of Representatives, one of the few Southern congressmen to support extending the Voting Rights Act of 1965. But still, for this dealmaker, the governor's mansion in Baton Rouge was prime real estate.
Many people who are in politics don't like it and want to get out, and as soon as they can, they do. But I had a different attitude. I wanted to be in. I wanted to be governor. I wanted to be in charge. I wanted to serve people.
And voters wanted him. So on May 9th, 1972, Edwin Edwards took the oath as Louisiana's 50th governor. And it seemed right away the self-proclaimed prince of the populist Long Brothers fired his M.O.
The first thing we did legislatively was writing a new constitution.
A 1973 constitutional convention on Edwards' watch streamlined Louisiana's charter from more than 200 agencies to 15. He also named more minorities and women to state government than any of his predecessors had.
There's one thing he was extremely good at, and that was delegation.
He got Louisiana to cash in on the 1970s oil boom by swapping the state's practice of taxing crude oil by flat volume to taking a percentage. Much of that money went to social programs throughout the state. Then in 1985, he got the state to help a car dealer named Tom Benson, who wanted to buy the New Orleans Saints to keep the team from flocking to Florida.
I'm kind of funny fella. I'm serious in a lot of ways and do my work and do my job. That's why I was reelected so many times. But on the other hand, every now and then I like to say things to try to be funny, to try to get attention.
And attention he got.
I did tell him on a couple of different occasions, you know, Governor, if you had just been a stand-up comedian, you could have been as big as Seinfeld. But no, you had to be governor. And he said, don't you think I think about that?
For Governor Edwards, 4 terms rose from one-liners, like from 1983 about his Republican opponent. David Treen is so slow, it takes him an hour and a half to watch 60 Minutes.
But I'm going to give you the true facts.
And the only way I can lose this election is if I'm caught in bed with either a dead girl or a live boy.
And of course, that's what gets printed.
And votes to you that have to get out from under the sheets. But
And the reputed ladies' man Edwards in 1991 against former Ku Klux Klan Grand Wizard David Duke for the governorship. The only thing we have in common, we're both wizards under the sheets.
Well, I think humor can be used to get attention and to let people know that you're not just a staid, nasty, serious person, that you view life with respect and you understand that life is to be happy and enjoyable, but at the same time to be serious about things that need to be done.
Good evening. It is all over now except for the counting. The election for governor in Louisiana, the polls have closed, and we can now project the winner, former Governor Edwin Edwards.
Let's send a message to America!
But long before Edwards won the term he chose to make his last, federal prosecutors thought he was the joke.
laissez les bon temps rouler. Let the good times roll.
To retire his 1983 campaign debt, he took some 600 supporters on planes to Paris. They wined and dined for $10,000 each for what Edwards touted as the biggest single fundraiser in U.S. political history.
Only form of gambling that I engage in, and only where it's legal, is the crap table.
Accusations of infidelity, high-stakes poker games, and pay-to-play schemes had dogged Edwards since the 1970s.
It was kind of par for the course, and you know, if you're going to get things done, make things happen, and you have power, you'll always have that problem.
By his own count, Edwards has been the subject of 24 criminal investigations. He risked 265 years in prison in 1985 for an alleged scheme to give preferred treatment to companies working with state hospitals.
It is a difficult time for me, and it's a difficult time for the state, but I've been through difficult times before.
That case ended first with a mistrial and again with an acquittal.
What would you do if you're acquitted?
Well, then I'll own a television station and pick my own newscaster.
When word leaked that half of the jurors had stolen towels from their sequester space, Edwards quipped, quote, "I was acquitted by a jury of my peers."
Some prosecutors are just very ambitious and anxious to make a name for themselves, and the bigger the game, the bigger the profits.
But on May 9th, 2000, 28 years to the day after first taking Louisiana's highest elected office, the man who lit up rural Avoyelles Parish hit darkness.
I'm not making excuses for him. There are some things that he didn't do that he did that weren't right.
A jury convicted Edwards of extorting nearly $3 million from applicants seeking state casino licenses.
Of course, everybody has regrets on some things I could have done better, some things I shouldn't have done.
To date, Edwards maintains he was not guilty of the charges against him.
I, Edwin Washington Edwards,
And insists that he never raided the public purse.
Although the press and zealous prosecutors tried repeatedly to show that, but I had a clean record. I still do. Nothing that I ever had problems with involved my role as governor.
Nonetheless came 8 years in federal prison and the end of a second marriage. For Honeycutt's biography of him, an 82-year-old Edwards wrote this in 2009, "I may live to get out of prison, or I may not. If I do, I hope to accomplish some final gift to my state that in some way may restore my legacy." And so he spent his days working at the Oakdale Prison Library, teaching inmates how to read.
I helped 9 inmates get their GED, and I was working with 5 others when my term expired, and I didn't want to wait around to see if they made it, but I hope they did.
And toward the end of his sentence, the elder statesman inmates nicknamed Gov again found love.
When I first met him, I think that was probably the first time that I understood what charismatic really was.
Trina Grimes Scott started writing to Edwards during his prison term. He was 83, she 32. He wrote her back, and she paid him a visit.
I kind of expected him to just be, I don't know, I hate to say beaten down, but kind of. But he wasn't.
I called my oldest daughter after she left and I said,
"Oh God, don't say that."
I just met one of Hugh Hefner's calendar girls. I thought she was the most beautiful girl that I'd ever seen, and she still is.
The pair wed shortly after his release in 2011.
If I'd have known that that was going to give me the opportunity to meet and know Trina and ultimately marry her, I would have gladly walked into prison.
Together, the two took on a brief A&E reality show, a congressional bid in 2014, and a son named Eli.
If you want exercise, you get hold of a 5-year-old boy.
He gets up every morning and brings him to school. He picks him up most of the afternoons, and if he isn't doing that, he's bringing him to the park or bowling. He's really a great daddy.
I have 4 children, all of whom are over 60 years old. When my first children were born, I was very occupied as a lawyer and a politician, and I really didn't spend as much time with them as I should have. But I'm making it up with Eli.
He says his work as a real estate broker keeps him busy while Eli's at school. And with Trina working in the business too, it's a family affair.
For me, she's an expert on internet, computer services, the use of the telephone. It took me 6 months to learn how to use the telephone when I got out of prison because I'm used to dialing.
But he adds that what hasn't changed on the Edwards phone line
It probably have to be Thursday for me.
are the conversations.
Practically not a day goes by but I don't meet somebody who reminds me of something that I did for him or her years past. I didn't remember it, but I was very pleased that they were nice enough to thank me, and I appreciate that.
This guy is more like a cat with 9 lives. You know, he just keeps coming back. He just keeps coming back. And everybody who criticized him and railed against him in the 1970s and 80s and 90s, they're all gone now. He's outlived everybody.
The secret? The 91-year-old says he's never tried alcohol, cigarettes, or drugs, just good genes.
The Chinese say if you sit by the bank of the river long enough, you will see the dead bodies of your enemies come floating by. And I did it.
He says he'd like to live long enough to see his son graduate high school in about 13 years, when the former governor would be 104. Beyond that, Edwin Washington Edwards hopes Eli Wallace Edwards' familiar initials will serve him well.
Trina, of course, is very optimistic. She has a shirt made for him, EWE for Governor 2053. You can probably vote for him. I won't be able to be around.